My brother Charlie called me choking on his own tears, hiding on the cold tiles of his bathroom floor like a terrified prisoner. When I discovered that his glamorous wife had been systematically poisoning him, starving him, and crushing his spirit to steal his quiet fortune, I didn't call the police. I didn't involve my lawyers. Instead, I boarded my private jet, took his place, and became him. I walked through the front doors of his estate wearing his face, but carrying a military-grade rage. And I taught that sociopathic woman and her greedy accomplices a clinical lesson that will haunt them for the rest of their miserable lives. My name is Dr. Alon Anderson. I am 60 years old. And unlike my brother Charlie, I have never been a victim. I spent decades as an Air Force medical doctor, making tactical life-or-death decisions and studying the precise ways a human body can be broken and healed. I retired to build a billion-dollar empire, living a life of pristine, quiet luxury, operating in the shadows and completely isolated from the noise of the world. Charlie, however, was always the gentle one. He was an empath with a heart too big for his own chest, a man who saw the good in everyone, even the predators. We share the exact same sharp features, identical down to our distinguished salt and pepper hair, but our lives could not be more different. I landed my private jet at a small, quiet airfield just outside the city. The night air was sharp and cold. A black SUV waited for me on the runway. My private security team had already picked up Charlie from the dark street corner where he had been hiding. I opened the heavy car door and stepped inside. Charlie sat in the back seat. Seeing him was like looking into a broken mirror. We had the same dark skin, the same sharp jawline, and the same salt and pepper hair. But the man looking back at me was a ghost. His eyes were wide and filled with fear. His cheekbones stuck out sharply against his pale, sickly skin. As a doctor, I saw the truth instantly. Severe malnutrition, muscle wasting, deep sleep deprivation. He was starving both in body and in spirit. He hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself look as small as possible. He flinched just from the sound of the car door closing. I sat up straight, my back like iron. We were twins, but right now our worlds were completely different. I was a weapon, and he was a casualty. "Alone," he whispered. His voice was cracked and dry. He reached out a shaking hand. I took it. His grip was weak, his fingers freezing. I felt a wave of anger hit my chest, hot and heavy. I pushed it down. A military doctor cannot operate if his hands are shaking with rage. I needed to stay cold. I needed to stay clinical. "You are safe now, Charlie," I said quietly. My voice was steady and firm. "I am going to fix this." I handed him a thick, sealed folder. Inside were the details of a high-security medical retreat on a private island. "You are flying out tonight on my jet. You will use a fake name. You will have a team of the best doctors, private chefs, and armed guards. You will eat, you will sleep, and you will heal. Nobody will know where you are. Nobody can hurt you there." Charlie looked down at the folder. A single tear rolled down his thin face. "What about Chimena?" he asked. His whole body shook at the sound of his wife's name. "She will kill you alone. She is too smart. She watches everything. She controls everything." "She has never watched me," I replied. I ordered my men to bring the bags. Right there in the back of the SUV, the switch began. I took off my expensive, custom-made midnight blue suit. I folded the fine wool neatly and put it away. I took off my luxury watch and handed it to my head of security. Then, I reached into Charlie's duffel bag and pulled out the clothes he had brought. They were awful. I put on a faded, baggy gray sweater. I pulled on a pair of old, worn-out slacks that were 2 sizes too big. I slipped my feet into scuffed, cheap shoes. The clothes hung off my military-honed frame. They swallowed my strength and hid my posture. I looked in the rearview mirror. I messed up my neat, short hair to match his unkempt look. I practiced dropping my shoulders. I let my chin fall toward my chest. I made my piercing eyes look tired, defeated, and empty. The transformation was complete. On the outside, I was the broken husband. On the inside, I was a billionaire with a plan. "Give me your phone, Charlie," I said. He handed over his cheap, cracked device. "And give me your keys." He dropped the house keys into my palm. They felt heavy, like the keys to a prison cell. But to me, they were the keys to the battlefield. "Go," I told him, putting a firm hand on his shoulder. "Do not look back. I will call you when the job is done." I stepped out of the SUV. The cold wind hit my face. I watched my brother walk slowly up the stairs to my jet. A medic was already waiting for him at the top. For the first time in years, Charlie looked like he could finally breathe. The jet engines roared to life, and within minutes, he was gone into the dark night sky. Now it was my turn. I drove Charlie's old, beat-up car to his neighborhood. It was a gated community with massive, beautiful homes. It was the kind of place where people hid their ugly secrets behind perfect green lawns and expensive gates. I parked in the long driveway of Charlie's estate. The house was dark, looming against the night sky like a fortress. I walked up the stone path to the front door. I put the key in the lock. It clicked loudly in the silent night. I pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped inside. The air in the house felt heavy and suffocating. The entryway smelled of cold marble and expensive, rich vanilla perfume. Everything was perfectly clean and wildly expensive, bought and paid for with my brother's hidden money. I stood in the grand hallway, keeping my head down, playing my part perfectly. Then, I heard soft footsteps coming down the grand staircase. Chimana walked out of the shadows and into the dim hallway light. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Her deep brown skin glowed flawlessly. Her sleek, bone-straight hair framed her sharp cheekbones perfectly. She wore a dark emerald silk robe that flowed behind her with predatory elegance. To the outside world, she looked like an angel. But as a doctor, I knew how to spot a virus. Her eyes were completely cold, calculating, and dead inside. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at me standing by the door in the baggy sweater. She saw the slumped shoulders. She saw the messy hair and the eyes staring at the floor. She smiled. It was a cruel, sharp smile that never reached her eyes. "Look who finally decided to come crawling back," she said. Her voice was smooth, high-fashion, and dripping with poison. "I hope you are done throwing your little pity party. Lock the door. And do not track dirt on my floors." She turned her back on me and walked toward the kitchen. She thought she was giving orders to a weak, broken man. She thought she had all the power in the world. I slowly turned around and locked the heavy front door. I kept my head down. I did not say a single word. I just let her believe her own lies. She had no idea that the husband she tortured was already miles away in the sky. And she had no idea that a highly trained predator was now standing in her hallway, holding all her dirty secrets, ready to burn her perfect little empire to the ground. I followed the sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The house was massive, a showcase of extreme wealth. High ceilings, crystal lights, and expensive art hung on the walls. But it did not feel like a home. It felt like a very pretty cage. I found Chimana in the kitchen. The room was huge, covered in bright white marble that looked like ice. She was pouring a glass of dark red wine from a bottle that easily cost $1,000. She did not offer me any. She did not even look up when I walked in. "Put the keys in the bowl, Charlie," she ordered, her voice bored. "You know I hate it when you leave them on the counter. It scratches the stone." I did exactly as she said. I kept my head down. I let my shoulders slump forward, pulling the baggy gray sweater tightly around my chest. I placed the keys softly into a silver bowl. In the Air Force, they teach you how to survive behind enemy lines. Rule number 1 is simple: observe before you act. You do not fight until you know the battlefield. You do not strike until you know the enemy's exact routine. I was no longer a billionaire CEO. I was a spy in my brother's personal hell. I was running a full diagnostic on the woman trying to destroy him. "Where did you go tonight?" she asked. She took a slow sip of her wine. Her intense, dark eyes finally locked onto me. "Just walking," I whispered. I made my voice sound raspy and weak, just like Charlie's had been on the phone. "I just needed some air, Chimana." She rolled her eyes. The disgust on her flawless face was crystal clear. "You are pathetic when you sulk. Hand me your phone." It was not a request. It was a command from a master to a dog. This was how she isolated him. She controlled his communication. She cut him off from the outside world, so no one could see what she was doing. I reached into my pocket with a shaking hand. I pulled out Charlie's cracked, cheap phone and handed it to her. She snatched it from my fingers. Her long, perfectly manicured nails brushed against my skin. They were as cold as ice. She unlocked the screen. She obviously knew his password, and quickly checked his call history and messages. I had already wiped the location data and the desperate video call he made to me. Finding nothing, she tossed the phone onto the marble counter. It landed with a loud, harsh crack. "You have no friends, Charlie," she said softly, leaning against the counter. She smiled that terrible, empty smile again. "Nobody wants to hear you complain. You are lucky I put up with you. Now clean the stove. I made dinner earlier, and the housekeeper does not come until tomorrow." I looked at the stove. There was a small pan sitting there. Inside was a tiny, cold portion of plain white rice and a piece of dry chicken. That was his dinner. Meanwhile, the scent of rich, buttery steak and garlic hung in the air from whatever she had cooked for herself. Starvation. It was a slow, cruel tactic to drain his energy and break his will to fight back. "Yes, Chimana," I muttered. I walked over to the stove. I grabbed a sponge and began to wipe the already clean surface. I moved slowly, like a man who had nothing left to live for. But behind my tired eyes, my mind was racing like a supercomputer. I was mapping her tactics. I saw the casual disrespect. I saw the extreme financial control, her wearing thousands of dollars in silk and gold, while her husband wore rags and ate scraps. I saw the psychological warfare. She wanted him to believe he was worthless. She wanted him to believe he needed her to survive. She finished her wine and set the glass in the sink. "When you are done, go to your room," she said. She turned and walked back toward the grand staircase. "I have important meetings tomorrow regarding the estate accounts. Do not wake me up." The estate accounts. My brother's hidden money. That was the prize she was hunting. I waited until I heard her bedroom door click shut upstairs. Then I stopped scrubbing. I stood up straight. My spine cracked softly as I released the hunched posture. I rolled my shoulders back, letting my muscles stretch. The weak, defeated man vanished in an instant. The military doctor returned. I left the kitchen and walked down the dark hallway. I needed to find where Charlie slept. I checked the first few doors. Guest bathrooms, a home gym, a massive office filled with Chimana's expensive things. Finally, at the very end of the hall, near the laundry room, I found it. It was a tiny, cramped room. It felt more like a storage closet than a bedroom. There was a small, uncomfortable-looking twin bed shoved into the corner. A single thin blanket lay on top of a flat pillow. The room was freezing. The air vent had been taped shut. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly. I stood in the dark, letting my eyes adjust. This was where my brother had suffered. This was where he had cried. This was where his wife had shoved him away like a piece of broken furniture, so she could steal his life in peace. The anger flared up in my chest again, burning hotter this time. My hands balled into tight fists. But I breathed in slowly through my nose and exhaled through my mouth. I forced my heart rate to slow down. Anger makes you sloppy. Cold logic makes you deadly. I sat on the edge of the small bed. The mattress was hard and unforgiving. I looked around the dark, quiet room. To a normal person, this was just a sad, lonely space. But to me, it was something else entirely. This entire house was a crime scene. Every cruel word, every hidden bank record, every cold meal was a piece of evidence. Chimana had built a perfect trap for a gentle man. But she had made one fatal mistake. She forgot that the gentle man had a brother. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark, listening to the silence of the viper pit. I memorized the layout of the house. I listened to the sounds of the floorboards. I tracked the security cameras I had noticed in the hallways. I was gathering my data. I was preparing my tools. Tomorrow, the real diagnostic would begin. I was going to find the poison. And then, I was going to find a way to make her swallow her own medicine. Morning came quickly. I had spent the entire night sitting on the edge of the hard twin bed, planning my next move. When the sun finally began to shine through the small, dirty window of the storage room, I stood up. I rolled my neck until it cracked. Then, I put on the baggy clothes, dropped my shoulders, and became Charlie once again. I walked quietly down the long hallway toward the kitchen. The smell of fresh, expensive coffee filled the air. Chimana was already there. She wore a sharp, dark red business suit that fit her perfectly. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, flawless style. She looked like a woman preparing to conquer the world. She stood by the marble island, typing on her phone. Without looking up, she pointed a long finger toward the small table in the corner. "Your breakfast is ready," she said. Her voice was flat and cold. I shuffled over to the table. Sitting on a cheap plastic plate was a small piece of dry toast and a bowl of watery gray oatmeal. I sat down and looked at the food. As a doctor, my senses are trained to pick up on things that normal people miss. I leaned in slightly. The oatmeal did not just smell like plain grains. There was a very faint, bitter scent hiding underneath. It smelled like crushed almonds and chemicals. My heart beat a little faster, but my face showed nothing. This was not just a terrible meal. It was a slow-acting poison. She was giving him tiny doses every single day, slowly shutting down his organs while making it look like a natural illness. It was a perfect, evil plan. Eat it, she snapped, finally looking up from her phone. I am not wasting good money on groceries for you to stare at them. She walked over to the coffee maker to pour herself another cup. As she turned around, her elbow bumped a silver spoon resting on the counter. The spoon fell and clattered loudly against the hardwood floor, landing right near my feet. Ximena stopped. She looked at the spoon, and then she looked at me. A cruel smile spread across her beautiful face. This was her favorite game. Power. Pick it up, Charlie, she ordered softly, and wipe it off before you eat your slop. I do not have time to fetch clean silverware for you. For 30 years, my brother had lived in fear of this woman. If he were here, he would have scrambled out of his chair. He would have apologized, grabbed the dirty spoon, and eaten his poisoned food in shame. That was the response she expected. That was the reality she had built. But I was not Charlie. I did not move. I stayed in my chair, staring at the gray oatmeal. The kitchen was completely silent. The only sound was the humming of the expensive refrigerator. Did you hear me? Ximena asked. Her voice grew sharper, annoyed that her pet was not obeying fast enough. I said, pick it up. I slowly lifted my head. I let my hunched shoulders straighten just a few inches. I looked her dead in the eye. I did not give her the frightened, broken stare she was used to. Instead, I gave her the cold, calculating look of a military commander. It was the look I used when a soldier stepped out of line. It was heavy, dark, and completely unafraid. No, I said quietly. My voice did not shake. It was smooth and deep. I think I will just get a clean one, Ximena. Ximena froze. The coffee cup in her hand trembled slightly. She stared at me, her dark eyes wide with shock. The air seemed to leave the room. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She was trying to process what had just happened. Charlie never said no. Charlie never looked her in the eye. Charlie never spoke with a steady voice. Something was wrong, but she could not name it. She felt the sudden shift in power, and it terrified her. I watched her mind race. She was looking for the weak, broken man she had tortured, but for one brief second, she saw a predator instead. I knew I had to pull back before I ruined my cover completely. I quickly dropped my shoulders again. I looked away, staring at the floor, and rubbed the back of my neck as if I were in pain. I muttered, forcing my voice to sound weak again. My back hurts today. Bending down is hard. I will just grab a clean spoon from the drawer. I am sorry. Ximena blinked. She shook her head slightly, trying to clear away the confusion. The brief flash of panic in her eyes turned back into anger, but she was still off balance. She took a deep breath and smoothed the front of her red suit. You are acting very strange today, she said, her voice tight. She grabbed her designer purse from the counter. She did not look at me with total power anymore. She looked at me with a tiny sliver of doubt. Eat your food and stay out of my way. I have meetings with the estate lawyers today. I will be gone until the evening. She turned and walked quickly out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the heavy front door slam shut. The lock clicked. I was alone. The second her car engine faded down the driveway, I stood up. The slouch was gone. The weak voice was gone. I moved with the speed and precision of a soldier on a mission. The first crack in her reality had been delivered. She was distracted and confused. Now, I had the perfect window of time to work. I walked over to the table and picked up the bowl of tainted oatmeal. From the hidden pocket of my baggy pants, I pulled out a small, sterile plastic tube. It was part of a medical testing kit I had smuggled in. I carefully scooped a sample of the gray mush into the tube and sealed it tight. I dumped the rest of the food down the garbage disposal and washed the bowl clean. I needed absolute proof of the chemical she was using. My private lab in Chicago would have the exact chemical breakdown by tomorrow. Next, I headed for the grand staircase. It was time to find her secrets. I walked down the upstairs hallway and stopped at the heavy double doors of her private office. The handle was locked. It was a high-end electronic keypad lock. To a normal person, it was a solid wall. To an Air Force tactical officer, it was a minor delay. I pulled a small, flat tool from my pocket, bypassed the electronic panel, and popped the manual override. The door clicked open in 10 seconds. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The office was perfectly neat. A massive mahogany desk sat in the center of the room. I began my search. I did not tear the room apart. I moved methodically, lifting papers and placing them down exactly as they had been. I checked the computer, the trash cans, and the bookshelves. Then I noticed the bottom drawer of her desk. It had a hidden keyhole underneath the handle. I picked the lock smoothly and pulled the drawer open. Inside was a thick black folder. I opened it and started reading. My eyes scanned the documents quickly. Bank transfers. Offshore accounts. Legal drafts transferring complete control of the Anderson family estate into Chimana's sole name. She was draining my brother dry piece by piece. But the most important thing was sitting right beneath the folder. It was a small, clear glass bottle. It had a dropper attached to the lid. The liquid inside was completely clear, like water. I picked it up with a gloved hand and unscrewed the top. The faint, bitter smell of crushed almonds hit my nose instantly. Here was the murder weapon. I did not take the bottle. I carefully placed it back exactly where I found it. I closed the drawer and locked it. I had the evidence I needed to start building the trap. Chimana thought she was a genius. She thought she was untouchable. But she had no idea that her world was about to come crashing down, and I was going to be the one to light the match. The house was completely silent. The only sound was the heavy rain hitting the tall glass windows of the estate. I waited until the grandfather clock in the main hallway struck 2 in the morning. Chimana was a heavy sleeper. She felt entirely safe in her perfect, controlled world. That was her biggest mistake. I slipped out of the cold, cramped storage room. I did not wear Charlie's baggy clothes. I wore a dark, fitted shirt and dark pants. I moved down the hallway with silent, military steps. My destination was Chimana's grand home office. I had found the poison earlier, but poison is just a tool. I needed to understand the true motive. As a former Air Force doctor, I know how to find the root cause of a disease. As a billionaire, I know how to follow the money. I stepped into the office and closed the double doors softly behind me. I did not turn on the main lights. I used a small, red-lens tactical flashlight that would not be seen from under the door. I walked over to her massive mahogany desk and opened her sleek silver laptop. A password screen popped up immediately. People like Chimana are arrogant. They think they are much smarter than everyone else, which makes them very predictable. I pulled a small, black USB drive from my pocket. It was a high-grade decryption tool created by my private security team in Chicago. I plugged it into the side of the computer. Lines of green code ran across the screen. 3 minutes later, the laptop unlocked. I sat down in her expensive leather chair and began my forensic analysis. I dug deep into her digital paper trail. Chimana was not just a bully, she was an organized criminal. I found bank statements, tax files, and private emails. For the past 2 years, she had been quietly draining Charlie's personal savings. She did not just take the money. She funneled it through 3 different fake companies to hide it. The money bounced from local banks to empty businesses and finally landed in a secret offshore account. The account was in her name only, but the stolen cash was just pocket change compared to her main target. I opened a hidden folder on her desktop labeled Estate Transfer. Inside, I found a series of highly detailed legal documents. My eyes scanned the complex paragraphs. It was a legal maneuver designed to completely separate my brother from his most valuable asset, the Anderson family estate. The estate was a massive piece of commercial land that our parents had left us. It was worth tens of millions of dollars. Charlie had always refused to sell it. To get around his refusal, Chimana had hired a corrupt lawyer to draft a petition for medical conservatorship. She was preparing to tell a judge that Charlie's mind and body were failing. She was going to claim he could no longer make his own decisions. Suddenly, the whole evil picture became clear. The physical abuse, the forced isolation, and the slow-acting poison were all connected. The poison was not meant to kill him quickly. It was meant to make him look confused, sick, and crazy. When she finally brought him in front of a doctor or a judge, they would see a broken man. They would hand complete legal control of his life and the multi-million-dollar property straight to her. Once she had the legal power, she could sell the land, take the money, and leave Charlie to rot in a cheap facility. My jaw tightened. A cold, dangerous calm washed over me. I pulled out my encrypted smartphone and dialed a secure number. My lead lawyer, Marcus, answered on the second ring. Marcus managed my billionaire empire. He was a shark in the courtroom, and he knew exactly how to destroy a person's life legally. "Alone," Marcus said. His voice was sharp and alert despite the late hour. "Is the situation stable?" "Charlie is safe at the retreat," I replied, keeping my voice low. "But I have just uncovered the entire architecture of her plan. I am sending you a secure data package right now." I copied the offshore bank records, the fake company names, and the illegal estate transfer documents. I sent them directly to a secure server. I am opening the files now, Marcus said. I heard the rapid clicking of his keyboard. He went silent for a moment as he read through the documents. When he spoke again, his tone was completely serious. She is setting up a complete takeover. This is massive financial fraud alone. If she gets a judge to sign this conservatorship, she can sell the Anderson land out from under him. She is not going to get the chance, I said, staring at the glowing computer screen. I have the proof of the poison. Now I have the proof of the theft. I want you to build a counter-architecture. Track every single penny she moved to that offshore account. Find the corrupt lawyer who drafted these papers. Prepare a massive lawsuit for fraud, theft, and attempted murder. But do not file a single piece of paper yet. You want to trap her, Marcus stated. It was not a question. I want to let her think she has won, I replied. I want her to gather her friends, put on her expensive clothes, and try to execute this plan in public. We will freeze her accounts and drop the hammer exactly when she thinks she is crossing the finish line. Understood, Marcus said. I will have my entire team on this by morning. By the end of the week, she will not be able to buy a cup of coffee without our permission. I hung up the phone. The trap was now fully constructed. I removed the USB drive from the laptop and shut the computer down, leaving everything exactly as I found it. I wiped the desk and the keyboard with a cloth to remove any trace that I had been there. I walked back down the dark hallway to the small storage room. I lay down on the hard, uncomfortable twin bed. For the first time since I arrived, I actually smiled. Chimana was a predator who thought she was hunting a weak, defenseless animal. She had no idea she had just stepped onto a landmine. All I had to do now was wait for her to take the final step. The air in the house felt tight, like a stretched rubber band ready to snap. Chimana was getting nervous. I could see it in the way her dark eyes followed me around the kitchen on Friday morning. She was watching my hands. She was waiting for the familiar, weak shaking that the poison usually caused. But because I had been secretly throwing the tainted food away for days, my hands were perfectly steady. She did not understand what was happening. Her perfect, broken husband was suddenly standing a little taller. He was not flinching when she walked into the room. Predators rely on fear. When the fear disappears, they panic. And when a woman like Chimana panics, she gets dangerous. She decided she could not wait for the slow poison to finish the job. Her grand dinner party was tomorrow night. She needed complete legal control of the estate, and a tragic, sudden accident would give her everything immediately. A grieving widow inherits much faster than a divorcing wife. "Charlie," she said smoothly, breaking the heavy silence. She was wearing a crisp white dress, looking like a picture of innocence. "The caterers are coming tomorrow morning. I need you to go down to the lower cellar and bring up the heavy silver serving trays. They are on the top shelf in the back." "Yes, Chimana," I muttered. I lowered my head and let my shoulders slump, hiding the cold, sharp focus in my eyes. I walked slowly toward the back hallway. The lower cellar was an old part of the estate. It was reached by a steep, narrow flight of solid concrete stairs. There were no windows and the lighting was very poor. It was the perfect place for a fatal accident. As I reached the heavy wooden door at the top of the stairs, my military training kicked in. A soldier never walks blindly into a dark space. I stopped. I breathed in deeply through my nose. The faint, sharp smell of fresh lemon oil hung in the air. I looked down. The very edge of the top concrete step was shining. She had coated the edge with a thick, slippery layer of furniture polish. I crouched down and looked at the heavy iron handrail attached to the stone wall. I reached out and tapped the metal bracket with one finger. It rattled. She had completely removed the long screws holding the rail to the wall. It was a simple, deadly trap. If a weak, dizzy man stepped on that slick edge, his foot would slide out from under him. He would naturally reach for the iron handrail to save his life. The broken handrail would rip away from the wall, and he would fall headfirst down 20 steep, concrete steps in the dark. A broken neck was almost guaranteed. It would look like a terrible, sad accident. I stood up. I pulled my secure, black smartphone from my pocket. I hit the record button and slid the phone into my front shirt pocket, making sure the tiny microphone was not covered. Then, I raised my foot and kicked the heavy wooden doorframe as hard as I could. The loud, solid thud echoed down the hallway. I immediately dropped to my knees on the safe, carpeted floor, breathing heavily and groaning as if I were in terrible pain. Seconds later, I heard the rapid clicking of Chimana's heels on the hardwood floor. She practically ran down the hallway. She was expecting to see an empty doorway and a broken body at the bottom of the stairs. Instead, she saw me sitting safely on the top landing, rubbing my knee. She stopped dead in her tracks. Her face dropped. The mask of the perfect, caring wife shattered completely. Her eyes went wide with shock, and then they narrowed into pure, ugly rage. She had wanted to see me dead, and she was furious that I was still breathing. "What are you doing on the floor?" she snapped. Her voice was sharp and cruel. There was no fake sweetness left. "I tripped, Chimana," I whispered, making my voice sound weak and confused. "My legs feel so dizzy today. I tried to grab the doorframe, but I fell. I cannot go down those stairs. I am too weak." She marched right up to me. She stood over me, looking down like I was a piece of trash. She was so angry that her trap had failed that she lost all her careful control. Her arrogance took over. She thought she was talking to a broken, useless man who was too stupid to understand what was really happening. "You are completely useless," she hissed. She leaned down close to my face. The microphone in my pocket caught every single word clearly. "I cannot believe you are still alive. I have been putting that expensive liquid in your oatmeal for an entire year. Your heart should have stopped months ago. But you are too stubborn to just die." I looked up at her, keeping my face perfectly terrified. You are making me sick?" I asked, my voice shaking. She laughed. It was a cold, evil sound. "Of course I am, Charlie. Do you really think I wanted to spend the rest of my life taking care of a pathetic loser like you? I want the Anderson estate. I want the land, and I want the millions it is worth. If you won't fall down these stairs and break your neck today, it does not matter." She stood up straight and crossed her arms, looking down her nose at me. "Tomorrow night, all my friends and lawyers will be here," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "You are going to come out of your little closet, and you are going to sign the legal papers handing everything over to me. You will do it because you are weak and you have no one else. And once I have the signature, I am locking you in the cheapest, darkest nursing home I can find. Now get out of my sight." She turned around and stormed back down the hallway. I stayed on the floor until I heard her walk into the kitchen. Then I stopped shaking. The fear vanished from my face. I stood up smoothly, my balance perfect. I reached into my shirt pocket and tapped the screen of my phone to stop the recording. I pressed play. The audio was perfect. Every hateful word, every confession of the poison, every detail of her plan to steal the estate played back in high definition. I smiled. It was the cold, calculating smile of a predator who had just trapped its prey. Chimana had orchestrated this accident to get rid of me. Instead, she had just handed me the key to her own prison cell. She had confirmed on tape that she was an abuser, a thief, and a murderer. She had no idea that the man sitting on the floor was not her broken husband. She had no idea that a billionaire doctor was silently taking notes. I sent the audio file directly to Marcus in Chicago. The final piece of evidence was secure. The trap was locked. Tomorrow night, she was going to throw a party to celebrate her victory. But she did not know that I was going to be the one serving the final course. The rain finally stopped on Friday night, leaving the estate wrapped in a thick, heavy silence. I sat on the edge of the hard twin bed in the dark storage room. Tomorrow was the big dinner party. Tomorrow was the day Chimana planned to steal my brother's life completely. My encrypted smartphone vibrated in my pocket. The screen glowed with a single secure message from Marcus, my lead lawyer in Chicago. I pressed the screen to connect the call and held the phone to my ear. "Alon," Marcus said. His voice was sharp, professional, and entirely serious. "I have the final report. We found everything." "Tell me," I replied quietly. I kept my eyes on the locked bedroom door, listening for any footsteps in the hallway. "My team followed the money trail from the offshore accounts you sent me," Marcus began. "Chimana has been very careful, but she left digital footprints. We found the corrupt lawyer she is paying. We have all the illegal paperwork drafted for the estate transfer. We also got the lab results back from the food sample you dropped off." "And the poison?" I asked. My voice was as cold as ice. "It is a highly controlled chemical compound," Marcus confirmed. "It is illegal to own. It attacks the nervous system slowly over time. It causes muscle weakness, confusion, and eventually heart failure. It is designed to look exactly like a natural, tragic illness. The amount she was giving Charlie would have killed him within the next few months." I closed my eyes for a second. The anger burned hot in my chest, but I pushed it down, turning it into pure, focused energy. "We have the lab report. We have the bank records. And we have the audio recording of her confessing to all of it on the stairs today. Yes, Marcus said. It is an airtight case. We can send her to federal prison for the rest of her life. But Alon, there is one more thing. It is about the Anderson family estate. I leaned forward. What about the land? Chimana thinks she is stealing a property worth $10 or $15 million, Marcus explained. His voice held a hint of dark amusement. She thinks that is the jackpot. But she is greedy, and she did not do her homework. Our private investigators dug into the city zoning laws. What did they find? I asked. The Anderson estate sits right in the exact center of a proposed commercial development project, Marcus said. A massive international tech company is trying to buy up that entire valley to build a new global headquarters. They need your brother's land to access the main highway. Without the Anderson property, the entire billion-dollar project fails. The true value of that land, if negotiated properly, is not $15 million. It is well over $200 million. The number hung in the quiet air of the dark room. $200 million. Chimana was starving my brother, poisoning him, and treating him like an animal for a fraction of what the land was actually worth. She was a monster, but she was also a fool. She was playing a small, dirty game while standing on a gold mine. She has no idea, I whispered. None at all, Marcus agreed. She is rushing to get this legal paperwork signed tomorrow night because she wants to sell it quickly to a private buyer. She probably has a side deal to take the cash and run. But we have already frozen the buyer's accounts. The trap is completely set. Whenever you are ready to drop the hammer, my team and the federal authorities are standing by. Have the authorities wait outside the gates tomorrow night, I commanded. Nobody comes in until I give the signal. I want her to think she has won. I want her to feel the victory right up until the exact second I take it all away. Understood, Marcus said. Good luck, Alon. The line went dead. I put the phone down on the bed. I had the full picture now. I held all the pieces. The poison, the stolen money, the murder attempt, the true value of the estate. I had built a perfect cage, and Chimana had happily locked herself inside it. I picked up the phone again. I needed to make one final call. I opened a highly secure, untraceable line that connected directly to my private medical retreat on the hidden island. A nurse answered on the first ring. Security desk, she said quietly. This is Dr. Anderson, I said. Put my brother on the line. Right away, sir. There was a brief moment of silence, followed by the soft sound of a door opening. Then, I heard the rustle of the phone changing hands. Alon! The voice that came through the speaker made me freeze. It was not the weak, raspy, broken whisper I had heard in the back of the SUV just a few days ago. The fear was gone. The exhaustion was fading. The voice was clear, steady, and strong. It sounded like my own. Charlie, I said. A rare, genuine smile touched my face. You sound different. I feel different, Charlie replied. I could hear a deep, calming breath on the other end of the line. I ate a real meal today alone. The chef made steak. I walked outside in the sun. And I slept. I slept for 14 hours in a bed that did not feel like a trap. The doctor's here. They flushed the chemicals out of my system. My hands are not shaking anymore. Hearing the strength returning to my twin brother's voice was the greatest victory of all. The military doctor in me had stabilized the patient. The billionaire in me had protected the asset. But the brother in me had just saved his family. I am glad, I told him gently, because the healing is just the beginning. The disease is about to be cured completely. Charlie was quiet for a moment. He knew exactly what I meant. Is it time? He asked. The hesitation that used to control his entire life was completely gone. It is time, I confirmed. Tomorrow night, Chimana is hosting a private dinner party. She has her corrupt lawyers coming. She thinks she is going to force me to sign the estate over to her. She thinks she is finally crossing the finish line. But she is really stepping off a cliff, Charlie said smoothly. Exactly, I replied. I have everything, Charlie. I have the proof of the poison. I have the bank records of the stolen money. I have a tape of her confessing to trying to kill you. And my lawyers just discovered that the land she is trying to steal is worth over $200 million. She is a criminal, and tomorrow night, her entire world ends. What do you need me to do? Charlie asked. He was ready. He was no longer a victim hiding in a cold bathroom. He was an Anderson. My security team is going to put you on my private jet tomorrow morning, I instructed. They will fly you back to the city. You will wait in a secure car outside the estate gates. When I give the signal, you will walk through the front door. You will let her look at the man she tried to destroy, and you will watch her realize that she has lost everything. I will be there, Charlie promised. His voice was like iron. Thank you, Alon. Get some rest, brother, I said. Get ready. It is almost over. I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the silence of the big, empty house. Tomorrow, the dinner party would begin. Tomorrow, I would sit at the table wearing Charlie's face. I would look into the eyes of a monster, and I would smile. The war was already won. Tomorrow was just the execution. Saturday morning brought clear skies and a flurry of activity. The estate was filled with noise. Caterers rushed through the kitchen, carrying silver trays and expensive crystal glasses. Chimana floated through the house in a dark green silk robe, barking orders at the staff. She felt like a queen on coronation day. I stayed out of the way, sweeping the patio in my baggy clothes. But my real work was already happening in the shadows. Chimana's evil plan required witnesses and legal muscle. She needed her corrupt lawyer, Mr. Vance, to handle the paperwork to steal the estate. She needed her private physician, Dr. Eris, to agree that my brother was losing his mind. She believed these men were her loyal allies. She paid them while using Charlie's stolen money. But loyalty bought with stolen money is very fragile. Around noon, Chimana left for a 4-hour spa appointment to prepare for her big night. The house was empty except for the busy caterers in the kitchen. That was my window to strike. Mr. Vance arrived at 1 o'clock to drop off the final estate transfer documents. I opened the front door before he could even ring the bell. Charlie, Vance said, walking past me without any respect. He did not even look at my face. I need to leave these in Chimana's office. Make sure she sees them before the guests arrive. I closed the heavy front door and locked it. The loud, heavy click made him stop and turn around. He expected to see a broken, frightened man. Instead, I stood perfectly straight. I dropped the baggy sweater from my shoulders. I looked at him with the cold, hard eyes of a military commander. You will not be leaving those papers anywhere, Mr. Vance, I said. My voice was deep, steady, and completely normal. Vance frowned, confused. Excuse me? Charlie, do not play games. I am busy. My name is not Charlie, I said, taking a slow step toward him. And you are completely out of your league. I pulled my encrypted tablet from my pocket. I brought up the secure files my lawyer, Marcus, had sent me the night before. I turned the bright screen so Vance could see it clearly. I showed him the offshore bank accounts, the illegal wire transfers, and the exact digital trail of the money Chimana had paid him to write the fake conservatorship. Vance's face turned the color of ash. His arrogant, confident smile vanished in a single second. I am Dr. Alon Anderson, I explained smoothly. I am Charlie's twin brother. I have a team of federal lawyers waiting for my signal right now. I have all your private emails. I have the proof of your fraud. If you walk out that door and try to warn Chimana, you will be arrested before you reach your car. You will lose your license, and you will spend the next 20 years in a federal prison. The lawyer began to shake. His knees went weak, and he dropped his expensive leather briefcase onto the floor. He realized instantly that the man standing in front of him was not a victim. I was a predator, and I had him by the throat. What do you want? Vance whispered, terrified. I want you to attend the dinner party tonight, I commanded. I want you to sit at the table. You will smile, you will play your part, and you will hand me the pen when Chimana asks for the signature. When my trap springs, you will cooperate fully with my legal team. Do that, and you might only lose your career instead of your freedom. Yes, Vance choked out, sweating heavily. Yes, I will do it. I promise. Get out, I said. He grabbed his empty briefcase and practically ran to the door. One ally down. One to go. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. It was Dr. Eris. He was the man providing the slow-acting poison that was meant to kill my brother. He walked in carrying a small black medical bag. He thought he was coming to give Charlie a final calming injection before the party, so I would be too weak to fight the paperwork. I led him into the private study and shut the heavy oak doors. Roll up your sleeve, Charlie, Dr. Eris said, digging into his bag. He did not look at me either. Chimana wants to make sure you are nice and relaxed for the guests tonight. I am perfectly relaxed, doctor, I said. The strength and calm in my voice made him freeze. He slowly looked up. I was standing right in front of him. I reached out and grabbed his wrist. My grip was like a steel vise. In the military, you learn exactly where to apply pressure to completely paralyze a man's arm. Dr. Eris gasped in sudden pain, dropping his medical bag to the floor. Glass vials clinked together inside. "Let go of me," he panicked, trying to pull away. "I sent a sample of the oatmeal to a private lab in Chicago," I said softly, leaning in close so he could see the fury in my eyes. "I know exactly what chemical you have been giving her. I know it attacks the nervous system. I know it is highly illegal." Dr. Eris stopped struggling. His eyes grew wide with pure terror. His face went pale. "You are not a doctor," I told him, my voice like ice. "You are an assassin, and you just tried to assassinate the brother of a billionaire." I let go of his wrist. He stumbled backward, rubbing his arm, breathing heavily. I pulled out a printed copy of the lab report and threw it onto the desk. He looked at it like it was a loaded gun. "My federal team has already drafted the attempted murder charges." I lied smoothly, letting the heavy threat hang in the air. "But I am going to give you a choice. Tonight, you are going to sit at that dinner table. When I reveal what is really in that poison, you will not defend her. You will confess to everything. If you try to run, my security team will drag you back here." Dr. Eris fell into a leather chair. He buried his face in his hands. His medical career, his freedom, and his entire life were over. He nodded slowly, too terrified to even speak. By the time Chimana returned from her spa appointment at 5 o'clock, the house was perfect. The caterers had set the grand dining table with expensive crystal and fresh flowers. The smell of roasted meats and rich sauces filled the air. Chimana walked in glowing with confidence. Her hair was flawlessly styled. She wore a stunning, deep burgundy silk dress that looked like royalty. She looked like a woman who had already won the lottery. "Everything looks beautiful," she said, looking around the grand dining room. She saw me standing in the corner, wearing an oversized, wrinkled gray suit she had picked out to make me look foolish in front of her friends. She smiled her cruel, empty smile. "Are you ready for tonight, Charlie? Mr. Vance and Dr. Eris will be here soon. They are going to help us take care of everything." "I am ready, Chimana," I muttered, keeping my head down. She turned and walked upstairs to put on her jewelry. She felt so powerful. She believed her support network was solid rock. She had no idea that I had spent the entire afternoon hollowing it out from the inside. Her corrupt lawyer was terrified of me. Her private doctor was ready to confess to everything to save himself. They were no longer her allies, they were my prisoners. She thought she was walking into a room full of loyal friends who would help her steal an empire. But the truth was entirely different. Chimana Anderson was walking into an empty room, and she was completely alone. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell began to ring. The grand dining room was a glowing picture of extreme wealth. Crystal glasses sparkled under the bright lights of the massive chandelier. The caterers moved silently around the room, serving expensive wine and appetizers. Everything was perfect. It was the exact setting Chimana wanted for her final victory. She stood near the front door, greeting her high society friends. Her deep burgundy silk dress caught the light as she moved. She smiled warmly at everyone who walked in. She played the part of the brave, loving wife perfectly. She hugged her guests and whispered sad stories about how difficult it was to care for a sick husband. The guests nodded with deep pity. They praised her for her strength. They had no idea they were talking to a monster. I sat at the far end of the long dining table. I wore the oversized, wrinkled gray suit she had picked out for me. I kept my head down. I let my shoulders slump forward, making myself look small and weak. I even let my hands shake just a little bit as I held my water glass. The guests glanced at me and quickly looked away. They whispered behind their hands. They saw a broken, fading man. That was exactly what Chimana wanted them to see. She wanted witnesses to prove that her husband was completely helpless. Then, her two most important guests arrived. Mr. Vance, the corrupt lawyer, walked into the dining room. He was carrying his heavy leather briefcase. Right behind him was Dr. Eris, the man who had supplied the poison. I watched them carefully from under my eyelashes. They looked absolutely terrified. Mr. Face was pale, and he was sweating heavily. He kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Dr. Eris looked like he was walking to his own funeral. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely hold the glass of wine a caterer handed to him. Chimana noticed their nerves, but her arrogance blinded her to the truth. She walked over to them and placed a gentle hand on the lawyer's arm. "Relax, gentlemen," she whispered softly, thinking they were just anxious about committing a massive crime. "Everything is perfectly fine. He is heavily medicated. He will not fight us. Just stick to the plan, and you will get your money tomorrow morning." Mr. Vance swallowed hard. He looked past her shoulder and made direct eye contact with me. I stopped my hands from shaking. I gave him one cold, blank stare. Vance quickly looked at the floor, looking like he might be sick. He knew that the man sitting in the wrinkled suit was not a heavily medicated victim. He knew I was a billionaire holding the keys to his prison cell. Dinner was served. The food smelled rich and heavy, but the tension in the room was thicker than the roasted meats. Chimana sat at the head of the table, directly across from me. She controlled the entire conversation. She laughed loudly. She drank her expensive champagne. She made sure everyone at the table was paying attention to her. Every few minutes, she would look at me with a fake, sad smile, asking if I was feeling okay. "I am fine, Chimana," I muttered quietly each time, playing my part. I barely touched my food. I simply sat completely still and absorbed the room. I was a soldier waiting in the trenches for the exact right moment to strike. I let her talk. I let her build her lie higher and higher. The higher she built it, the harder she would fall. Finally, the caterers cleared the dessert plates away. The room grew quiet as the staff left the dining area. Only the guests, the lawyer, the doctor, and my brother's cruel wife remained. This was it. Chimana stood up. She picked up a silver spoon and gently tapped it against her crystal champagne glass. The sharp, ringing sound echoed through the large room. All conversation stopped. Every face turned toward her. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Chimana began. Her voice was smooth and practiced. She placed a hand over her heart, looking deeply emotional. "As my closest friends, you know the heavy burden my family has carried lately. You know that my sweet husband, Charlie, has been struggling." She looked down the table at me. Several guests sighed in sympathy. "His health is failing," she continued, letting a single, fake tear form in her eye. "His mind is not as sharp as it used to be. It breaks my heart to see him like this. But as his wife, I must be strong. I must be practical. I must protect him and the legacy of the Anderson family." She paused, making sure everyone was hanging on her every word. "That is why we are here tonight," she said clearly. "To protect the estate from being lost or mismanaged. Charlie has bravely decided to sign complete legal and financial control over to me. He is doing this to make sure he is cared for, and to make sure the land stays safe in my hands." She turned toward the sweating lawyer. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice turning sharp and commanding, "please bring out the documents." Mr. Vance stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the wood floor. His legs were shaking so much he had to lean against the table to keep his balance. He slowly opened his leather briefcase. He pulled out the thick stack of legal papers. These were the fake documents designed to steal the $200 million property. He walked slowly down the length of the long table. Every guest watched him. He reached my chair. He placed the thick folder on the table directly in front of me. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a heavy gold pen, and laid it gently on top of the papers. He looked at me. His eyes were begging for mercy. I gave him none. Chimana walked down the side of the table. The soft swish of her silk dress sounded like a snake sliding through grass. She stopped right behind my chair. She placed her cold, perfectly manicured hands heavily on my shoulders. It was a clear, physical threat hiding under a gentle touch. "Sign the papers, Charlie," she whispered smoothly. "Show everyone how much you love me. Show them that you trust me to take over." The entire room was completely silent. 10 wealthy guests were leaning forward, waiting to watch a man give away his entire life. The lawyer held his breath. The corrupt doctor looked like he was about to faint. I looked down at the thick legal folder. I looked at the shiny gold pen. I had spent days eating her poison scraps. I had lived in a freezing storage closet. I had listened to her call my brother useless, pathetic, and broken. I had done everything I came to this house to do. I had the bank records. I had the lab results. I had the recorded confession. I took a slow, deep breath. The waiting was finally over. Now it was time to drop the hammer. I did not pick up the gold pen. Instead, I reached up and calmly lifted Chimana's cold hands off my shoulders. I dropped them as if they were covered in dirt. A ripple of confusion went around the long dining table. I pushed my chair back. The wood scraped loudly against the floor. I stood up. I did not hunch my shoulders. I did not keep my head down. I stood at my full, imposing height. The wrinkled gray suit suddenly looked like a military uniform on my frame. I looked straight into Chimana's eyes. "Charlie, sit down," she hissed, her voice tight with sudden panic. "Sign the papers." "I am not signing anything," I said. My voice was no longer a weak, shaking whisper. It was a deep, commanding boom that echoed off the crystal chandelier. I reached into my jacket pocket. I did not pull out a pen. I pulled out my secure, black smartphone. I tapped the screen and linked it to the expensive smart speakers built into the dining room walls. "You wanted to share a story about my health with your friends tonight," I said to the silent, staring guests. "But I think you should hear the real story." I pressed play. Chimana's own voice filled the room. The audio was crystal clear, raw, and full of hate. "I cannot believe you are still alive. I have been putting that expensive liquid in your oatmeal for an entire year. Your heart should have stopped months ago. But you are too stubborn to just die. Tomorrow night, all my friends and lawyers will be here. You're going to sign the legal papers. And once I have the signature, I am locking you in the cheapest, darkest nursing home I can find. Now get out of my sight." The guests gasped loudly. A woman at the end of the table covered her mouth in absolute horror. A man knocked over his wine glass, letting the red liquid spill across the white tablecloth. The room turned into a frozen block of ice. Chimana's face lost all its color. She looked like she had just been struck by lightning. She reached out, trying to grab the phone from my hand, but I stepped back smoothly, entirely out of her reach. "That is a fake," Chimana screamed. Her perfect, elegant mask was completely destroyed. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He is crazy. He made that up. Dr. Aris, tell them he is losing his mind." Dr. Aris did not speak. He put his head down on the table and began to cry silently. He knew federal charges were already waiting for him. Mr. Vance, the corrupt lawyer, scrambled out of his chair. He backed away against the wall, holding his hands up in total surrender. They knew the game was over. Chimana stared at her broken allies. Then she turned her wild, terrified eyes back to me. The way I stood, the coldness in my stare, the absolute lack of fear. She finally realized the truth. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her voice trembled with a sudden, crushing terror. "You are not Charlie." I adjusted my jacket. I looked at the greedy, evil woman who had tortured my family. "No," I said coldly. "My name is not Charlie. My name is Dr. Alon Anderson. I am a retired Air Force medical doctor. I am the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. And I am his twin brother." Right on cue, the heavy oak doors of the dining room swung open. Everyone turned to look. A man walked into the bright light of the chandelier. He wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit. His dark, salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed. His back was straight, and his eyes were clear, sharp, and totally unafraid. It was Charlie, but he was no longer the broken, starving victim. The poison was out of his system. The fear was gone. He was a wealthy, healthy man who had finally taken his life back. The guests let out a collective gasp of shock. They looked from me to Charlie, seeing two identical men, both standing strong and unbothered. Chimana took a step backward. Her legs were shaking so badly she almost fell. She looked at the real Charlie, the husband she thought she had destroyed. "Hello, Chimana," Charlie said. His voice was steady and calm. "I believe you have some papers for me to sign?" She could not speak. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her entire empire was crumbling into dust right in front of her eyes. She had tried to steal a $200 million estate, and instead, she had locked herself in a cage. Suddenly, bright red and blue lights flashed through the tall glass windows, painting the dining room walls in sharp, frantic colors. The sound of heavy boots hit the front porch. The federal authorities, briefed and guided by my lawyer Marcus, burst through the front doors. "Nobody move," a federal agent shouted, walking straight into the dining room. He held up a thick stack of warrants. "Chimana Anderson, you are under arrest for attempted murder, massive financial fraud, and wire theft. Mr. Vance, Dr. Aris, you are also under arrest." Police officers moved in quickly with heavy metal handcuffs. Chimana screamed and fought. She kicked her expensive heels against the floor as they pulled her arms behind her back. The elegant, high-society wife was gone. Only a desperate, ruined criminal remained. Dr. Aris and Mr. Vance surrendered quietly, too terrified to even look up. I did not stay to watch them drag her away. I had done my job. The diagnostic was complete. The parasite had been removed. I walked over to my brother. We looked at each other for a long moment. No words were needed. The nightmare was finally over. "Let's go home, Charlie," I said quietly. "Yes," he replied. A real, genuine smile finally touched his face. "Let's go." We turned our backs on the screaming woman, the shocked guests, and the flashing police lights. We walked out of the grand front doors together, stepped into the cool, clean night air, and neither of us ever looked back. Here is the word for today. Sometimes the greatest danger lives under our own roof, using our love as a weapon. Charlie's story is a stark reminder that abuse and manipulation thrive in silence and isolation. If you find yourself shrinking to survive someone else's cruelty, remember, your silence is their greatest power. You are not broken. You don't need a billionaire brother to fight back. You just need the courage to expose the truth. Reach out, speak up, and take that first step. Reclaim your voice and your dignity. The cage they built is an illusion, and you have the power to break free. If this story of justice satisfied you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments, would you have gone to such lengths to save your sibling? Until next time, thanks for listening.